Hello folks, I got here a little minute or two early so that I can make sure things are working okay. So I'm checking now to see whether we have the audio problems that I had last time. All right. So I'm checking now to see whether we have
good.
the audio problems that I had. Now I can turn off the volume there. Okay, great, because last time I had 3 false starts, so I wanted to get a little early, and I also wanted to show you that I create an uplifted environment for myself when I'm practicing. So we're about to practice together a little bit, and I wanted to set up the room. This is my office, but I have pictures of my beloved lamas on top, my teachers from Tibet, and then I have books, of course, and so I lit some lights as kind of light offering. And this is part of creating joy in practice. The beautiful thing about, all Dharma traditions is they have art associated with them. They're very closely tied. Do you like doing it like the traditional style, the way that your teachers did it, if you have a teacher? I love the art, and these things I think was in there maybe, and many colors and multiplicity. So like how the sprinkles you put on a cupcake, how they spark joy in you. And a lot of the things that are on our traditional Buddhist shrines, have that kind of joyful aspect. Now there's some people that are drawn more to the very simple Zen aesthetic from Japan, for example. Beautiful woodwork and very subtle. And then others like myself, honestly, one of the reasons I joined the Sangha I did was not only was the shrine room really colorful and playful, and playful in the sense of being a lot of joyful imagery there. But my first teacher, Lama Tarchin Rinpoche, they said in the advertisements for him that he was an artist. And I imagined him before I met him, wearing a beret and having a paintbrush in his hand and maybe painting big abstract arts. And the only Lama I really know who does, who's like free like that in their art is Zigar Kongtrul Rinpoche of Colorado. But there may be a few more. But Lama Tarchin Rinpoche was actually a very traditional craft style artist who did everything according to traditional rules of proportion and beauty in the Tibetan tradition. And those rules take out any, the images have makeup on, just like I do today. I try to remove all the imperfections so that your mind is completely uplifted when you look at that Dharma art. So it's an integral part of my practice and of all my teachers' practice, is this shrine appreciation. And Zansur Khyentse Rinpoche just spoke maybe a week ago, about he's a guy, he's one of them. I cite him a lot because a lot of you are familiar with him, at least online. He said it just moves him so much. All the incense and the candles and all that, it just really opens up something in him. But the other way is okay if you're a person who just likes to sit, and very unelaborate, and it doesn't matter where you are. It could be on a subway or wherever. That's beautiful too. So if you're here tonight and you're I'm not smart enough to find the page that tells me whether there's people listening or not. 2. It says 2. I think one of those might be me watching myself. So today's topic is joy, and it's a continuation of our last week's talk. And not just talk, but practice. And I gotta say, I got nervous today thinking about, do I have to look like the cover of a yoga journal or something with, just looking completely elated and joyful all the time. I guess I'm looking at myself now. I do look a little joyful. I'm happy to be with you tonight. And why am I happy? Why do I do this? Because Dharma completely transformed my life. And the 2 components that I've come to a conclusion is sort of most important for me is that the practice component, which is of course central, and then the intention, the bodhisattva intention, this great, developing a great big mind that really is concerned with the welfare of all living beings equally. And really, having that motivation to engage in practice for the benefit of others. And in our tradition, the way that tends to be read is that we're attaining complete realization and then we can benefit others. So in a way, you could, I'm not someone who's attained complete realization, so I shouldn't be doing this, but I can say that at least I can tell things are going in the right direction because I have more faith, I have more compassion than I did when I was young. Slowly, these qualities are blossoming so that now I'm an okay person, and I wasn't so nice when I was younger. And I have a lot of, what's the word, what blooms in your chest when you see, the lamas or teachers of the tradition that you love, you see images of Dharma art and so forth, and that something opens. That's a quality we have to develop as Americans. Well, maybe not always true. I think some people, I've known kids, they saw Buddha when they were a kid, and they knew that they had a connection there and it made them happy. And I think there's a lot of people like that. But for me, these are qualities I've had to develop inch by inch. So from that point of view, I feel that it would be mean not to share with you key points of basic practice so that you can have the same kind of results. So our ordinary happiness is, what's it dependent on? It's dependent on, oh, hi Rob, nice to see you. It's dependent on good things happening, right? We get what we want. Oh, what would be good? What good has happened to me? Yesterday, I met the minister of Livestream Church. It was just a gathering in Oakland, and I got a big hug from him. So then I'm happy. He's a wonderful guy. And then what's happened badly today? Oh, I was worried about screwing up this talk. So then I felt bad. And so it's all dependent on circumstances, right? You're sick and you're in the hospital and your happiness completely goes away. But it's inevitable we're going to be sick and go to the hospital. It's just a matter of time, right? I mean, it would be really rare to go through a whole human life and never go to the hospital your whole life, in this culture anyway. Am I right? So what we want, right, is something that to find an unchanging, something unchanging. They never translate it as the word eternal. I think it has some kind. It's illegal to do that, but to find qualities inside that wherever you go and whatever happens, including when you're in the emergency room of the hospital, that there's part of you that's okay. You might even be able to identify part of you that is joyful. And so let's explore that a little bit. It means making a choice of not being so hung up on our interactions with others and what happens in our day-to-day world, but caring more about what's going on in our inner life. Of course you care about other people, everything that's going on. But tending to, nurturing the latent qualities inside of us that enable us to be steady and find that joy within. Because joy is a good word, and we don't use it enough. So joy has immediacy, and happiness is like a long-term thing. I can't say I'm happy every single moment of every day. Definitely I'm not. But I can always find, if I take a moment and look within, I can find something inside that's okay. And if I really tune into it, there's joy there even in the hardest times. I remember noticing that. I remember talking to Lama Yeshe Wamo, who's an excellent Lama from our tradition from Hawaii. You should check her out on Jnanasuka, JNANASUKHA.org online. And I was talking to her about it many, many years ago. I said, this is when I was still prone to depression. I said, I'm depressed, but I'm kind of happy. I don't understand this. It was just a completely different way of relating to depression. And that started, and if you can get windows like that, or aspects of your consciousness, you can identify that everything, sensing depression is like everything is all bad. It's always been bad, it's always going to be bad, right? And if you can get little windows of joy in there with practice, even for a very short time, you don't have to be a marathon meditator to get these puffs or pops of joy. So let's just take a moment to start by settling our minds. We're going to use as our object of meditation, whatever you have in front of you. And I have in front of me an old lady's, one of these things. Glasses chain, except it's cloth. It's actually an old man's one because the men's ones are more sturdy. And it's really ugly, but it doesn't matter. No concepts. I'm going to put it down in front of me. And you pick out something, and we're just going to meditate using this. You notice I pushed myself up. Get that, put those, boobs out there. Whatever you got, the man boobs, it's okay. And I'm feeling the weight. I'm sitting in a chair, and I'm feeling the weight of my so-called sits bones down on this chair, so that I'm sitting in it, and I'm sitting straight up without forcing my shoulders back or anything unnatural. And then I'm going to look at my thing. I'm trying to get it the right height for me. You do the same. And we're going to meditate for maybe 5 minutes. And how do we do this? We bring our attention gently back to that object again and again. And you're not thinking about the object or trying to develop some concept of the isness or suchness of this object, like what's the soul of this thing. No, it's just a tool. So let's do that. And don't be violent with yourself, be kind. And just when you notice your thoughts have wandered, bring them back and put them on your object. And then just simply look at it. You can just look without concepts. And then again, your mind will drift off, and gently say, okay, time to come back. All right? So I don't know what you're like, but for me, it's still, well, for this kind of meditation, it's a little bit hard for me to sit down and do it. And once I sit down and do it for a while, I want to keep doing it. So that's what I'm like. Hi, Candy. Glad you're here. And so that's called shamatha, or pacifying or calming meditation using an object, physical object. It's the most basic form of meditation. And I imagine the process when I've seen great crafts people at work on sculptors, for example, painters. I think that's pretty much shamatha on an object. I'm remembering a story of Lama Tarchana Rinpoche used to tell. It's a little bit of a deviation here, but everybody likes stories from Lama Tarchana Rinpoche. He was a great yogi who settled in the Santa Cruz area for many years here in California. There's a belief in Tibetan Buddhism that when you pass away, that certain people who developed their practice to a certain point can see an array of deities that are inherent within your body that then get projected out in space in front of you when you're in a certain stage of the intermediate state. And I think it was a woman, maybe it was a guy. I don't know how they would know this, but this is maybe an old Tibetan tale, because this is after the point of no return in the dying process. But somehow she or he had been a Thangka painter, painting these beautiful scroll paintings, right? And oh no, she'd seen, it was like the wife of a Thangka painter or something like that, and she'd seen this painting of all these 100 peaceful and wrathful, enlightened representations on this Thangka, and she zoomed in on one particular one. I think it might have had an animal head, or it was a kind of an unusual figure. She thought, wow, that's really something. And then through that strength, by becoming familiar with that one Buddha, or representation of enlightenment, she then attained complete realization, complete enlightenment in the bardo, the period of time between death and birth, because she went, oh, that's that deity. So in that recognition, some transformation happened for her. Although actually the ultimate recognition is knowing that those are a projection of your mind, and all of this is a projection of our heavily conditioned mind. Actually, in reality, but realizing that when you're in bardo, that's quite a compliment. We practice for that by dream yoga. So practicing with your lucid dreaming and recognizing the dreams as unreal and just a dream. So that was a major discursive off there, but for you Vajrayana practitioners, there's a little present. So we've set our minds now a little bit, and I've been using the metaphor of trains actually on their tracks, choo-choo trains specifically, that you become aware when you start to meditate, and you see how much you're thinking that you're unaware of, and how much you're being tossed around doing this and that, kind of without even knowing what you're doing, just based on fleeting thoughts that go through your mind. Feelings and thoughts are handled in the same way by your system, without any recognition of anything underlying those thoughts, any kind of wakeful, light, expansive quality in yourself that's maybe more fundamental than all those choo-choo trains. And having used that metaphor, I had a dream. I think I went to sleep having thoughts, bad Udrin, having a lot of thoughts, and I was getting dragged down by it one night. And no, never happens, right? So I dreamed about trains. I dreamed I was in a valley, and I looked up and there was one set of choo-choo trains, and then there was another track up the higher on the edge of the valley was another train. And I looked further and there was another layer up, there was another train on it above me, and I was sunk down in this valley. And that is really a great metaphor, because we bury all our good qualities under all this conceptual thinking. And we can, in shamatha practice, or this kind of calming meditation, it slows things down so you get a little psst, psst, something that comes through. Between the slowed thoughts, there's a bigger and bigger gap between them. And maybe then ultimately you realize underneath the thoughts there's a continuity that goes through the thoughts. The thoughts aren't your enemy. They never are. But in the beginning we're experiencing it as that gap opening up a little bit. And in that space, you're letting go of, imagine wearing trains around your neck, like like heavy, like they're made out of lead, just chains of trains, cars around your neck, and there's one chain, and then you start in the morning with one chain, and then as the day goes on you add on another chain, another 20 pounds of chains, and then by evening you're all weighed down by these chains of trains. And what a relief it would be to take them off. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Even to take one of them off would be such a relief. 20 pounds lighter. So there's this kind of spacious wisdom, and this is the wisdom that doesn't involve concepts. And what are concepts? That's good our language has that word. It doesn't have a lot of words for the subtle concepts, the subtle vocabulary, technical vocabulary of Buddhism in Asian languages is not inherently present in English, because it's not a language was developed to communicate Dharma the way that, for example, Tibetan is. So Tibetan has a word for this aspect of your mind that's called lo. Ba, la, naro, lo, lo. That's how you spell it in Tibetan for your Tibetan language buffs. And it's the mind that frames things, it makes a concept out of things. It says, not only, there's that moment where you see, for example, in my garden, I have the ongoing situation with these lovely little flowers called oxalis, or wood sorrel. And they just are everywhere and packed in so close together, it's amazing they can squeeze themselves in. And they take over and they bury all the plants that I wanted to see. Right, so just seeing this plant as in its plantness, it's just a plant. There's no concept there. You're just seeing plant with yellow flowers. But then the next thought is, oh, wood sorrel. More wood sorrel. And the next thought is, I hate that wood sorrel. It's destroying my yard. And then you're filled with hatred. Who's being harmed by that? Is the wood sorrel getting any less plentiful by you thinking negative thoughts about it? No. wood sorrel doesn't care. So, like then the train has started, right? One car after another, and pretty soon, if you're really a hater, if you really love being angry, you can be ripping out that wood sorrel, Isn't that silly? We humans are amazing. So, what is it they say? First thought, best thought. Well, it's not so. First thought isn't neither here nor there. It's not bad or good or whatever. It just is. But then those other thoughts, they really mess up your mind. They create mind pollution. So let's see if we can do a little bit of meditation on the breath this time. And I'm going to give a practical tip to you. So these little 5-minute meditations, ideally they're done throughout the day at any little chance you get. Many times we're in public. So bring a book with you or an e-reader or whatever you have, or you could use your cell phone, but that's a little playing with fire, right? And then I have my piece of paper here. Lama Tarchin Rinpoche taught me this. Pick a spot in space, and it can be even through since the book is pretty close to you typically, hold the book in your hand at your local, say you're out at the deli getting some bite to eat on your lunch break or in the break room, whatever. Look right through that book into a point in space behind the book that is at a comfortable distance for you. And you can just practice like that, pretending you're reading, and then you won't be weird. I did make some faux pas during my working life with being weird, with practice, where people caught me muttering to myself, and it seemed, like I was crazy or something. So this is silent and very helpful. So bring something with you to read while you're thinking about your day on the transportation or whatever. So then let's practice like I'm going to put a sheet of paper in front of me and I'm going to look right through to behind it. And my eyes a little bit down and out in the sort of the direction of your nose, down, out, maybe an arm's length in front of me. Let's do that. So in case anybody watching this afterwards is new to meditation on the breath, it's very common. You take, in this system, you have your eyes open a little bit, wider if you're sleepy, and then you're naturally breathing with your mouth a little open and through your nose and mouth, and bring your attention back to the out breath. If anyone listening has questions, thank you for the likes. It helps. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So once you've let off those trains, and you set them down for a while, you can find, this sort of in that sort of nakedness. It's also like you could say you've been wearing a costume your whole life, playing out a role. So at some point through our early childhood training and our karmic underpinnings, from a Buddhist point of view, we come into this life with baggage, with entrainment of our conceptual thinking and many others, karmic traces from previous lives. But whether you believe that or not, for sure early childhood training helps you to develop an identity. And I don't think that's bad. I don't think it's good. I mean, for sure we don't want people to have low self-esteem, right? You don't need to try to rip away any kind of identity you have. But we're asked to make a core narrative in our heads, like to make this voice in our heads. And there was a article I posted on my Facebook account recently where it turns out some people don't actually have a voice in their head. I don't know if I'd say I have a voice in my head or don't have a voice in my head, but I definitely have some kind of continuum that I've labeled as Udrin. And my parents labeled it as Sydney, and there was some idea of a there, like there's a central soul with even for atheists, I think there's some concept like this, I don't know. And in reality, we have all these choo-choo trains of thought, and we just pick a kind of we decide on one, and they all have one of them's happy and one of them's sad, and one of them's neither sad nor happy, and one of them, there's just all these voices inside of us, right? And we choose to start having opinions and a self-identity, like this train of thoughts, this collection of train of thoughts is Udrin, is self, is I. But that is just like a piece of a much more expansive you that is not bound by having an identity. And that's a little scary, isn't it? To think I'm just going to drop this story. What did I do this week that I dropped my story? I remember thinking that there was something I did where I just decided to not listen to it. Instead, you can become this amazing bodhisattva, bodhi awakening, purified, your mind completely purified of all, like they call it dualistic, polar, knotted up conceptual thinking that has you all bound up in knots. And really open up and be, have all this imagery of naked women in the good news. There's imagery of naked women in the Tibetan tradition, more so than in the other tradition. The ancient Indian tradition, it comes from, there was also naked women, or mostly naked women there. And this is like that naked awareness, that naked presence beyond conceptuality. It has, yeah, it's emptiness, because there's nothing that can be identified there. But it's also inherent in abiding in that place, finding that place of wisdom in yourself. All sorts of good qualities come forth, like compassion, for example, for others. And it's a choice we can make. How do we make this choice? The toughest part for a lot of people is spending time alone. And I'm counting, I have the companionship. I don't live alone, but my roommates are gone a lot of the time, and I don't have embodied people around me most of the day, working on my stuff. So I'm, looking on Facebook, and I'm looking on Twitter, and I'm posting and all that stuff, and that's not bad. We're social creatures. But there's resistance internally for some of us to spend any time without that, and without our family and friends around us, constantly being in interaction. So taking a little time out to meditate means making a choice to do something maybe a little uncomfortable initially. Or it may be you're so wired to human contact that you can never practice alone. I've known people that really their sole place they practice is in Dharma centers when there's other people practicing with them. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a little hard to come by, isn't it? So, there's so much value, though. You get so much out of saying 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, once a day, 5 minutes, 3 times a day, 5 times a day, 6 times a day, or 1 hour once a day, or whatever your time frame is. To make a place for it, to close the door, to discuss it with your loved ones that you want to take up this new habit, and cultivate this state that will transform your life. Subtly, slowly, blossoming in those windows between thoughts. And you may not be able to find them, because as soon as you think, is this a window between my thoughts? You're thinking, right? So you just have to trust. There are windows between your thoughts, believe me. And then in there, this looks like a little window, and there's light coming out of it. This is a metaphor, not an actuality. And waking up this wisdom inside. Isn't that wonderful? So, making the bodhisattva intention, this big, vast intention that, every single sentient being in the world, you're going to lead to enlightenment, maybe outside the world. It goes hand in hand. There's no separation between having this vast, spacious, and open mind and that intent. That intent naturally arises. We force it by taking intentional vows as Buddhists who are part of the Mahayana tradition. There's different kinds of Buddhism, and one is really centered on this bodhisattva idea. And this one, that's the kind of Tibet, China, Korea, Japan, so forth. They're all centered in this bodhisattva idea. But the concept of bodhisattva is one thing. It's a good concept to have. Until enlightenment, we're all going to have concepts. So it's good to replace negative concepts with positive concepts. In the interim, at the same time, find emptiness. Everything's more vast, everything's more spacious. Not dwelling on the thoughts of the past, thoughts about what's going to be right now, not grasping onto that choo-choo train, resting nicely in an open state. So, one tool they do use in the Tibetan tradition, especially, but I've heard there's something like this, and there's actually something a little bit like this in Theravadan tradition, in the southern directions countries, and there's something like this in the Korean tradition. But really, the people go crazy with this is the Indo-Tibetan tradition of Vajrayana. And I'm not teaching Vajrayana on the web, but what they do is they start at the end point. So you start like imagining you're already that in a translucent body of light, and your mind is completely filled with non-conceptual wisdom and compassion, blossoms naturally without any effort at all, and in fact you're glowing. So we're not going to do the Amitabha practice today, but in that practice we've been doing each week, your self-visualization is Chenrezig, or Avalokiteshvara, and that means that you are way, way, way high up on the path of spiritual evolution. You're not 100% purified. This is the one way of looking at it, as I've said before. So one way to blossom these qualities is to imagine imagine right now you're already a bodhisattva, and you're a white bodhisattva. In the practice we've been doing, you have 4 arms, but you can have as many arms as you want, however you manifest, because you're only manifesting. Your only purpose is to benefit all living beings. And you're made of light, and which is white in this case, and in your heart is a moon. And from the moon, light rays are beaming out. You have 2 eyes. You're humanoid, 2 eyes. And from your heart, white light rays are beaming out in every direction. So I've been contemplating this very common style of visualization. And it's more complex than that in most Vajrayana practices, but that's the essential element. And thinking about the wounds in our, energetic body, so to speak, that's often talked about, the way we hold traumas in our body. Sad, or just, if you don't believe any of that, then just, where you feel your sadness. Some people, where you feel your anger, anxiety, all those painful emotions. And I think that these practices are very important for many reasons, but one is that they allow you to identify that part of you that is already awakened. So this Buddha nature, this mind of awakening. In some traditions it's referred to as like a seed or an embryo inside. And perhaps it could be centered in the heart, typically, in that way of looking at it. So maybe part of your heart, part of my heart feels kind of bad sometimes. Right? That's where I feel a lot. But to find some place in your heart where that moon can go. Find where it belongs. And your heart in this world that we're inhabiting, the world of Tibetan Buddhism, is in the center of your chest, not to one side. Put a little tiny moon there. Just if you can find any little spot, and then beam out those beams of light from there. And what happens is they outshine all our mammalian pains, the suffering, all that trained suffering is totally lit up. Can you feel it? Can you feel that shift? So let's do that. Let's have that moon send out those light rays together just for a few minutes, and that'll be our final practice together tonight. Can you see Chenrezig there? Can someone tell me if she sees Chenrezig? That's the white guy. I'm checking whether I can play around with this. I'm not sure. I have it on my screen. I don't know whether you can see it. If anybody's out there, you could leave me a little note. I have Chenrezig on my screen on the lower right hand corner, but I'm not sure if I can do that part of the way through. Oh, maybe I had to do that. Now is he there? No, I don't see him. Shoot. That's okay. Well, anyway, we see ourselves. So learning to see ourselves in a new way. Wonderful. It's not, the issue comes up of spiritual bypassing. Oh, there it is. Yay. Little tiny Chenrezig. John Wellwood, who was a psychologist here in the Bay Area and passed away recently. Oh, good. Okay, yeah, it just takes us a little lag there. Now I know. So, John Wellwood developed a famous idea that many spiritual people are avoiding covering up, emotional issues by, over meditating. I don't know. There's a whole book about it. And I think for sure those of us with problems are drawn to meditation and Dharma. And we do need to attend to. I have perceived, and my perception could be incorrect, people who've done lots and lots of practice who don't seem, are still, acting out negative behaviors, and their self-esteem hasn't come up, and there's still a lot of emotional problems and so forth. And I'm not criticizing them. That's, some situations are really hard, but I think that there also is value in. So in the Buddhist tradition, we aren't dwelling on looking into what is that pain and where it come from and that sort of thing. But I personally have found a lot of value in psychotherapy. So it's not in the Tibetan tradition, so a lot of the lamas are very guarded, cautious about endorsing any kind of psychotherapy, but personally it helps with everyday things. It's not I don't think there's lots of people who had marvelous signs of accomplishment who have, to the ordinary eye, would appear to have problems. But when it came down to it, maybe right there, just right when they're dying, there are all these hidden qualities, some marvelous qualities come out. So who knows? But for living your day-to-day life and having a good life, I think if you find that pain, for example, if you have a pain associated with some traumatic feeling, you think about that thing and it's there in your body, some somatic work with a therapist would be really good. If it's just not, so if things aren't letting go, if you're not finding your beautiful maiden, naked maiden coming out and blossoming, then, it's ideal to have someone who's both a practitioner and a therapist at the same time. So that's great. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for hanging with me. It's so nice to have 5 people here tonight. I think that's a record. And I'll see you next week. I think we'll be getting into aspects of impermanence. The whole theme here is really, what turns your mind to Dharma here in this very difficult times. It was a very difficult week for American society, for example. People are so divided. And based on our divisions and our concepts, polarized concepts, we've had a lot of anger and sadness and all kinds of anxiety, uncertainty about the future, and so forth. So a practice is really, I don't know how, some kind of practice is needed. I don't know how we can get by without it in these days. So that's why it's called World's on Fire. When this world's on fire, we have to practice, and we'll be going forth with different contemplations that turn your mind to the Dharma next week and in the coming weeks. Hey, have a good week, and I'll see you on next Monday. Bye-bye.